Roll the windows up.
What's going on?
Roll the windows up, hurry! It's
Chao.
he's broke, he's homeless, he's gonna try to ask for money. Roll the windows up.
Sonic is a long-running franchise with many highs and lows throughout the little blue dude's career. And with those highs and lows came many moments of experimentation, of innovation. After all, you can't just make a nearly 35 years worth of games without changing anything. The poor guy would have died out decades ago if not for the new things that they try out. And like the mountains of Sonic OCs out there, it's insane. But alas, change isn't just about adding things. It's also about dropping things. Things that just don't work. Stuff that just doesn't fit what they want to try next. Or things that do work and just never made a return for whatever reason. Yeah, there were a lot of mechanics and game modes and what have you that just got zipped from the Sonic meta as time went on. I guess they were just deemed suboptimal for the future, even when they worked. So I just wanted to take a little look-see back on some of the concepts and mechanics that got dropped along the way, specifically the ones that I think could absolutely bang in a new game. And first up, we got how some Sonic games used to handle their paper. Now, Sonic and how he stacks his rings has been a topic I've seen pop up here and there a few times, and it seems so simple outwardly, right? Especially if you're just looking at the first few games. You grab some rings, you up your score, you get your booty smacked, you lose said rings, but survive the hit, and you typically have a brief period to get some of those rings back. Easy concept to grasp, I'd say. But you see, things wouldn't remain exactly like this forever. I mean, of course not. It's in a video about change, butt munch. Stupid. I'm sorry I called you stupid and a butt munch. Let me give your brain a little kiss to make it feel better. Now, I'm not gonna look at every little change that the ring system had throughout Sonic's history, but there are some prominent changes that I want to talk about here, and those took place in Sonic Rush and Sonic Unleashed. But let's start with Rush since that came out first. Now, Sonic Rush's ring system is, for the most part, the same as the majority of Sonic games. You get your rings, you survive a hit, rings fly out of your ass. However, there was a slight difference with Rush, more specifically in how you got hit. See, normally, getting hit and having your rings fly out is just the regular beats. They fly out around you, and you can quickly grab them again with little to no consequence. But Rush dared to do something different, to make it just a little bit harder to do. They essentially added a system that made it so any consecutive hits that you take would cause your rings to fly increasingly further and further away. A slight punishment for getting your butt whooped repeatedly. Nothing crazy, but I enjoy the system regardless. It gives a slight incentive to be a bit more careful or wary while you're playing. An idea I find a bit of a shame wasn't really carried over to newer titles, but not the biggest loss either. Though a certain recent title could definitely stand to gain something from adding a bit of punishment at least similar to this, but we'll get to that. Now Unleashed, on the other hand, had a far more significant use to the rings beyond just score and surviving a hit. See, a lot of people have asked a question similar to, well, if I only need one ring to survive, why bother grabbing more rings beyond that? And while this mindset is weak, it is a great question to ask. Sure, there's score that you can worry about, but not everyone really cares about score and rank, which is also weak, but I digress. It's still a good point to bring up, and Unleashed answered that in a rather smart way, because this game's ring system would reward you for having more rings by letting you go faster. That way you'd have more incentive to keep those rings in your bag, while also adding a more tangible punishment for losing them. But this was also one of the games wherein you wouldn't lose all of your rings after being hit. As if you had more than 40, you'd only lose a chunk of them. Half to be precise. Despite being such a genius system, this would never make a return. Why? For what reason? For whatever reason, this system never made a comeback and I truly do not understand it. Rings went back to being the free meat shield they were in the beginning. And on top of that, we're becoming increasingly worthless to grab beyond filling your boost meter, because scores and ranks became far more reliant on your time over rings. And the boost gives you a form of pseudo invincibility to propel you forward on top of typically filling up on meter from killing enemies more than grabbing rings. Now Rush's ring scatter system and Unleashed's ring speed system are both things that I really hope appear in the next mainline title, most namely Frontiers' sequel, because the way rings were handled in that game difficulty wise was horrendous. Frontiers' combat and leveling systems, along with the Psyloop's ability to spawn rings out of thin air, kinda killed the difficulty for the game quite a bit. Now it made perfect sense for them to continue using rings as their health system due to the game's combat, making it both so you don't lose all of your rings on hit, and you can level your defense to lose even less of them on each hit. But they made it a little, too easy. Granted, both leveling up and Psylooping for rings are optional choices, you can just decide not to do them. But just like having the fishing system in the game, at least the way it was implemented, can act as a way to trivialize the progression of the game, having these systems implemented the way they were would act as a get out of jail free card. There's no need to be frantic about grabbing those surrounding rings if you can just quickly and infinitely spawn them at any time. It kills the vibe. Sure, you can't do this in the supersonic boss fights, which one could argue are where this is where you'd want those mechanics the most, but I think we can all see why they absolutely had to kill that. Superform invincibility with infinitely spawning rings would completely kill out any difficulty those fights could have. At least in its base form, you can still die before you spawn those rings. Plus, I can't lie, the feeling of speed just isn't too great in Frontiers a lot of the time, especially in cyberspace. The boost feels rather gimped in this game in a few ways, but most namely in speed. Even though you can level up your speed in this game, it doesn't actually affect the boost if I remember correctly. The boost stays the same speed throughout the game, and it doesn't do jack in cyberspace regardless of level. Removing the ability to Psyloop rings, adding in Rush's ring scatter system to discourage just brute forcing your way through everything without worry, and incentivizing holding onto your rings by increasing your speed with the more rings you hold, even if only in the cyberspace equivalent of that game, you know, the actual levels. I feel this would craft a much better experience in my humble and correct opinion. But that's enough about these systems. Let's move on to our next dropped game quirk. Chaos! Bring the Chao Garden back, please! Please, Sega, please! Okay, I know. This doesn't actually affect the gameplay of the main game itself, but it affects me, okay? I need to give birth to and raise the perfect racing and fighting Chao warrior and pit them against the Chao offspring of others online. The Chao Garden feels like a game mode almost perfectly crafted for an online experience, which is something that wasn't exactly the most common back when Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 came out. Even with the competitive aspect aside, just going online and walking around some sort of hub world to view other people's chows would be such a fun side mode to have in-game again. Having a chill little game mode to relax to on the side of the high-octane gameplay of the main game would be fantastic to have again. Plus, if they have you saving the animals or getting chaos drives the same way they did in Adventure 1 and 2, that's just further incentive to replay the levels beyond just, well, to actually replay the levels. Like I mentioned before, not everyone really cares about time, scores, ranks, or hell, even just improving their skill. Some fellas are just more casual, and that's perfectly fine. But if you give them something to collect within the levels to help nurse their chows, you're bringing in a whole nother demographic to replay the games and possibly even improve their skill as a byproduct of it, which, in turn, may help them enjoy the main gameplay even more. Some of us are ride or dies for our chows. We yearn for that bond with our little homies again, and they just never opted to bring this back again either. Unlike the ring systems I mentioned before, the Chao Garden has been a major asking point to return to the games for a very long time. And I'm one of those niggas asking for it to return. I kid you not, I probably spent more time taking care of my Chaos than I did actually playing the game in Adventure 2. But alas, I can never show you guys because my GameCube memory card just up and disappeared one day. Rest in peace, my little supersonic Chao. You'll always be missed and never forgotten. Unless I get early onset dementia. I'd also really hope that they could expand on the game modes within the Chao Garden, if and when they opt to bring it back. Like Adventure 2 has racing, karate, and kindergarten to bring your Chaos to. It doesn't sound like a lot, but those things alone kept me and tons of other people hooked for countless hours. So imagine how much more time we'd be willing to spend on those little fellas if they added even more. Like imagine something akin to contests in the Pokemon games. Something along the lines of a talent show or a beauty contest for those who haven't played any of those before. And as something to go along with that, imagine if we could get our Chaos dripped the fuck out. A clothing system for these little homies would go so goddamn hard, I'd be sliming mine out in the cutest goddamn fits you've ever seen. And this would even tie into the ring system again, because it would be the rings you collect that you'd use as a currency for these little homies. Once again incentivizing you to get out there and hold on to those rings for dear life. See how I tied these things together so masterfully? Man, screw Sega hire this man, Sega hire me! Me man! But I do feel like if it is a Frontier sequel that this appears in, or at least another game with a hub world to travel in, I feel like adding in some missions or challenges to do for more rewards or rings would be a great idea too. Cause I don't think everyone would want to endlessly replay levels just for more rings, you know? Gotta balance it all out. But I think that's enough out of me on the Chao Garden for now though. Let's move on to our next little gameplay quirk, shall we? One that actually did return for the first time in a long time, even if one of them was just DLC. And that's having multiple playable characters again. Now this is a bit of a touchier subject, since this is at least partially tied into the poor reception that the Sonic franchise had, mainly back in the 2000s. The growing cast of characters being one of the main points of ire for a lot of very loud people on the internet, always talking about Sonic and his annoying little friends, and how they needed to be removed from the games, until it seems like Sega and Sonic Team listened to them and dialed it all back. The only problem is that they were listening to the wrong niggas. Many of Sonic's characters were well beloved by the actual fans of the franchise. If there's a character that exists, there's bound to be at least one fan of them, no matter how obscure or random. And even if there wasn't, they just make a character instead. Like I said, Sonic OCs both were, and probably still are, extremely rampant. But even some of the more mainstream cast were getting hate, most namely Amy from what I'd seen, and even they would get dragged into the void for a good while, not counting Generations. It became a Sonic only zone for a very long time, and I find that to be such a shame. Even when they would come back for story reasons, their characterization was rather gimped, and mostly unimportant to the actual plot, mainly just cheerleaders or side characters to the Giga Chad Sonic. But I already went over that somewhat in a previous video, so I won't get distracted by all that here. Though in all fairness, I wouldn't say it was only non-Sonic fans that wanted the huge cast of characters to be cut down in gameplay, and I think Adventure 1 and 2 are the perfect games to showcase why that might be. I would say Heroes as well, but I think that's more of a game bloat issue rather than an issue of how the teams actually played. See, the adventure games both showcase several playable characters, and each one had a different style of gameplay. Adventure 1 had 6 different characters with 6 different, saying that rather loosely, gameplay styles. Starting with the more similar ones, we've of course got Sonic, holding up the standard Sonic gameplay that you'd expect. Tails being very similar to Sonic's, but with the added aspect of them being races against both Sonic and Eggman, and Amy's being a much slower Escape from Zero gameplay style. All the same at a base level, but with their own little quirks. Barring Amy, these are considered some of the highlights gameplay wise for the game. Amy would have been fine personally, but they just made her so slow that it kinda robs her story of some of its fun. But the other ones are where some people start to have some issues, like Knuckles' treasure hunting for example. A lot of people despise this game mode, even more so in Adventure 2, since they, for some reason, lock your radar to only show the emeralds in the order they decide, not whichever you're near at the time like in Adventure 1. But me personally, I was actually chill with it. I found it fun to just fly around and explore and search for those emerald pieces. Despite it being a game about Mr. Gotta Go Fast himself, I really didn't mind slowing things down this way. Could you tell I was the kid that spent tons of hours just flying around in my plane in Wii Sports Resort? No? Well now you know, nigga, you gonna learn today about me. But my mentality for this would also extend to the shooting range mode of E102 Gammas. This one is a bit more well received than Knuckles' story generally, but it's still rather half and half from what I've seen. And I'm definitely a part of the half that likes it. But it was Big's fishing gameplay that caught the most flack, and I can't lie to you, even I wasn't a fan of this one.
This is not a banger.
I feel like why I, and maybe others, could enjoy Knuckles' story while not feeling the same way about Biggs' story, despite both of them being rather slow, is that Knuckles still involved a form of action, of exploration, of speed in some way. Big's story, on the other hand, has a lot to do with finding a spot and waiting, hoping that the right fish slobbers on your rod, and then reeling that motherfucker in. It feels more like a game mode that works as a bonus minigame rather than a requirement to reach the final story, kinda like in Frontiers. And because of the mixed reception to all the game modes in Adventure 1, they streamlined it for Adventure 2, still having 6 different characters, but now only split into 3 game modes across 2 teams. Sonic and Shadow get the good old Sonic stages, Tails and Eggman get the E102 Gamma shooting ranges, and Knuckles and Rouge get the treasure hunting stages. And to me, I liked all of these modes, like I said before, so I have a lot more love for all of Sonic Adventure 2, except for a couple of treasure hunting stages, because of that. But you see, not everyone is me. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll leave up to you to decide. Choose wisely. A lot of people don't love the shooting ranges or the treasure hunting. They just want to play Sonic and go fast, and that's a completely fair thing to say about a Sonic game. And I feel like that reception is what caused them to go down a different route with some future games. Most namely, the handheld games, Advance and Rush. Damn, Rush is coming back again? Must be pretty good. Maybe it's a sign for more of you to play the Rush games. Now these games also had multiple characters to play as, but instead of each of them having a different game mode, they all played the same classic Sonic levels. The only difference to them was how they played. Each character would have their own quirks to how they worked, and the player could choose to play as any one that they preferred. Though in the case of Advance 2 and Rush, you kinda had to play as everyone to unlock the true final boss. Even worse in Advance 2, cause for some godforsaken reason, you had to do every special stage on every character to unlock it. Hey, so mid-editing me here. That's not true. It seems like I got my requirements mixed up, because beating the game with everyone and every special stage with them allows you to unlock Amy, not the secret boss. To unlock the secret boss, you only have to beat the game with everyone, and the special stages only with Sonic. So, my bad. I don't know who the hell wrote off on that, but I hope they got fired, rehired, and fired again, and then unlethally shot. I feel like this method of adding multiple playable characters was the best way to do it, but it was never really implemented in the console games, most likely due to the creeping sentiment that all of Sonic's buddies suck, and they all needed to be locked away. Advance 3 especially is where I felt like they peaked with this style, with the partner system. Having you play with two characters at once, with you actually controlling one, while the other would allow you to use some new abilities, both depending on the type of combo that you create between speed, power, and flight, and the specific characters you actually chose. For example, Knuckles and Cream and Knuckles and Tails are both power type combos, but the abilities you gain for them are completely different. And those different abilities would allow you to reach different areas of the levels and find paths forward that you like the best. That level of experimentation for the playstyle that you like the best was my favorite aspect of Advance 3, but it was also the only game it ever appeared in. Even if they never bring back the partner system, I beg of them to at least bring back the different playable characters. Everyone's gonna have their own quirks and likes, and providing slight variations to the same gameplay through different characters is a great way to shake up the experience without vastly changing the game styles like they did with the adventure games. Plus, there's basically no pain involved with adding them, since it's completely optional to play as other characters. If you only like to play as Sonic, then you can opt to only play as Sonic. It's a win-win, so lock in, Sega! And speaking of locking in, let's just shuffle on over to our next lost aspect. New stages! Now this one isn't going to be a long one to explain, because it's pretty straightforward. We just need more new, inspired stages. That's not to say we haven't gotten any in the last decade or so, but I think they started relying a little too much on either bringing old stages or stages that simply weren't all that inspired. I would say that this was more of a 2010s issue, but it still crept its way into Frontiers in 2022, and I'd say that's where we gotta call it truly. No more green hills, no more chemical plants, no more sky sanctuaries or death eggs. Just call it there, homies. We've seen enough of them. I don't really count Sonic Mania for this though, since that was an anniversary game like Generations. It makes sense for them to be taking a little trip down memory lane for those. Though something like Lost World and Sonic Boom, but don't worry about Sonic Boom, actually did have all new stages, but they were so uninspired that I just don't really care about them. They were just rather basic level themes, inoffensive. Stuff like, well, essentially Green Hill under a different name, a desert level, a snow level, a tropical level, and a volcano level as the last level. It was all just kinda there. Like they came up with the basic concepts and forgot to add anything more to most of them to make them more unique, you know? Like, compare that to something like Sonic CD, for example. Still having rather basic themes at their core, like another Green Hill like with Palm Tree Panic, or more underwater ruins with Tidal Tempest. But there is flair to these designs. They're just fantastic to look at, and just feel so fresh and lovely. Not to mention that they still had some more unique ideas too, like the colorful gem-filled mines of Quartz Quadrant, or the flashy star-filled sky of Stardust Speedway. I need more ideas like that. Get on that, fellas. Like, even if Frontiers had a story reason for bringing back old stages, except for that random city stage, I'm really not sure which game that was meant to be pulled from. It just doesn't excite me anymore. I've seen enough of those levels, and I truly want to see them make more new ideas, even if they follow similar themes to ones from the previous games. Just take a leap, damn it! I know y'all have it in you over there. You just gotta stop defaulting to the OGs. But that's about all I've got on that topic. But I've got one more game aspect that I truly hope they bring back in future games. And I've actually touched on this in another of my previous videos. Yes, I'm gonna keep plugging my videos. I'm very proud of them. But this is just about bringing back unlockable super forms and hidden bosses. Now this one right here is another one that I've got some fire for. But again, I'll shortly recap it since I delve further into it in that video I just mentioned, if you're interested. Cause the super forms were getting so little love during the 2010s. I've mentioned it several times before, but on top of the removal of the super forms as the piece de resistance against the final boss. They were also only usable in-game, if at all, by collecting every single red ring in the game. And in the case of Sonic Colors, the Wii version only, the DS version understood the assignment, having you do 21 special stages, 3 for each Chaos Emerald, that were unlocked by collecting said red rings. I bet you the same guy who thought of this was the same guy who decided on the Emerald design philosophy of Advance 2. Who let this nigga back in the kitchen? He is spoiling the food on contact! The special stages and the super forms we would gain as a reward for completing them all was always a fun little goal to reach for every game it existed in. Even when getting all the emeralds only unlocked the hidden boss and no playable super form, I loved it all the same. It gave me something else to work towards beyond just finishing the game, and was, quite frankly, just hype as all hell to play as. Blasting through these regular ass levels as this all-powerful being was fun. I enjoyed it a lot, but I enjoyed it a lot less when I already have to scrounge through every nook and cranny of the game to unlock it in the first place. Cause I'm already fairly done with the game by the time it's unlocked. It's dumb. Honestly, even the Chaos Emeralds themselves kinda just lost relevance in the game for a good while. It wasn't until Mania that they had any sort of relevance again. God bless Mania. And it wasn't until Frontiers that we really had the Super Form and Chaos Emeralds be story important as well. Though I don't want every game to have them be story relevant again. At least not beyond an unlockable final boss, because it would very easily lose its luster that way. I'd be happy with just having it be unlockable reasonably early into the game. The special stages themselves may have been rather hit or miss throughout the series' history, but I still quite enjoy having them in the games. They just gotta lock in to make them not suck. None of that 3D blast BS. So, that's just about everything I feel like future Sonic games would benefit from re-implementing. Even if it's not all of them in one game, or if some were never brought in at all, if the next mainline game is a Frontier sequel, and it likely will be, I don't even know if absolutely everything would work in that style of game, but seeing any of them added would mean something to me, man. Especially the Chao Garden. I want my kids back, Sega. But also heavy on the ring system and new stages if the next mainline game is indeed a Frontier sequel. That would already solve a good couple of my issues with Frontiers right there, something that I also mentioned in another previous video, but I've already self-shilled enough in this one. I'll spare you another shout out. Unless? The harsh reception towards many of these aspects ended up gimping many mechanics that future games could have benefited from, especially the addition of more characters. But I think with the increase in morale and confidence amongst the franchise in recent years, we could potentially see another era of experimentation. If ever a time to stop playing it safe, I'd say it's now. So basically, fellas, what I'm trying to say here is, either change Rouge's outfit or free her titties again, Sega. We're moving backwards, not forwards, people.